Yep, Jeffrey Morgan's the man's name, who's doing wonderful things out there in the community and corporate and individuals. He's changing lives in a great way. Sometimes the best gifts come badly wrapped. I say this all the time, but Jeffrey Morgan, welcome to the Run Home with Joel and Fletch.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to do this in two parts, Brian. We haven't done one of these for True Crime Tuesday like this. We're going to do the first part, true crime.
Right.
Then we're going to switch it to the success story which Jeffrey Morgan has become. Let's start at the start. You're a Redfern boy. You mentioned that you played a bit of rugby league against Brian Fletcher, but you grew up tough. It was I called it maybe at times a chaotic upbringing. 11 children in your family, but it wasn't an easy start to life, was it?
No, definitely. Parents dysfunctional.
Yep.
It was a way of life growing up in Everleigh Street, Redfern, and you could walk up that laneway and see everything that society doesn't want and think that as normal, and that became our chaos, that become normal within our lives. And you know, walking up, seeing domestic violence, drug use, people locked up, people getting out, and you know, people just dysfunctional in every way, shape, and form. It's just crazy. And then going out and playing, you know, Fletch when we're younger, just knowing that it was two different worlds. You know, I wanted to be a football player.
Yep.
And it's an escape for us as Aboriginal people. It's one of the things that we do know to do well. But, you know, for us just to see that as normal and think that's what I worked out later on in life, that most people see life as normal, but it's a bunch of chaos, and they got good at managing that chaos, and then they forget about their goals, dreams, aspirations, and that's where sort of I was able to transition out eventually.
So how old were you when you first did your first crime? Do you remember?
12 years of age, and I started out, I didn't even realise, I was just up the road from here and basically just hungry with a brother, sneaking under a canteen and taking some packets of chips to eat, and that was it. You know, Friday afternoon we'd go to the fridge, open it up, and there was nothing in that fridge. And like other kids at that age, 12 years of age, had proper functioning families. For me, Dad was a gambler, money be gone by Friday afternoon, and the rest of it would go on drugs and alcohol and big parties in the house. They'd be partying till all hours of the morning, and then the next day I'd be so tired at school, and the teacher say, "Are you bored, Morgan?" And I'd be like, "Man, if you only knew."
Yeah.
You know, it was just crazy.
Ducks on a pond in a way.
Yeah, pretty much. I was caught a duck once by a copper. Funnily enough, he said, "Mate, you're sitting nice and calm on top of the water, and underneath your feet are going for gold."
Wow.
And like you just look back and you think to yourself, no 12-year-old kid should go through that. And if we can get better as a society and understand people and why they function the way they do, usually it's because of a lack of role modelling or some form of wrong role modelling that led them into a space. And once we seek to understand, we can see society be a better place.
So, Morgs, 40 years ago, roughly, was there anything like was there anyone around that you could go for advice? Was there any, and was it used by like people in Everleigh Street?
Just my grandmother. And
oh, really? Yeah.
She was like, don't be like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what's that mean? And she's like, just don't be like them. Don't take drugs. Don't get locked up. But what are the actual steps to say no to people or not see that as normal within the environment? So you go out and you're playing football and you're running particular lines, and that's normal behaviour to yourself. For us, our normal behaviour was dysfunction.
Right.
But my grandmother didn't know the way out. What was a step-by-step guide? And as much as she inspired me not to be like everybody else, and her voice was always in the back of my head, it was just, there's no one that really showed us the way out.
So your mum's Indigenous, local to Redfern. Your dad, a German baker. Is that right?
That's correct.
So you'd scrap along, and I heard you saying somewhere you'd have all this great bread stuff, and you thought that was great, but really, Dad had bloused all the cash. And I imagine if they're having big parties and there's no cash in their household and you've got 10 kids, I can't imagine that relationship between your mum and dad. It would be very hard to be very stable. Is that fair to say?
Correct. And it was Dad was very violent. And I learnt later on, just recently, we opened an email and found a court report from ages ago. Couldn't believe it. I don't even know how it got there. But it said that my dad was abused 3 times physically by teacher, father, priest.
Yep.
And I understood that was his form of trying to get discipline across in the area. And you know, I look back on it and I'm grateful to the old man. He was trying with his best skills and knowledge to try and guide me in the right direction, but he had some bad habits in the background, and those bad habits unfortunately scared me out of the house, and that led to a life of crime.
So how old were you? Now, we know you were saying off air before that you were quite, if it is a word, good at bank robbers.
I heard Jolly say that. I mustn't have been too good because I got arrested for two, Jolly, and I'd served 12 years. So
No.
I'd say I was bad at it.
When you were going to do these bank robberies,
Yes.
were you high on drugs at the time, or did you? Why were you doing it?
It's crazy, eh? Like, I didn't get into drugs until I was 28.
Okay.
Which I always despised them. And I seen, when we were about 13, a whole bunch of girls in the area died, probably about 4 of them. May they all rest easy. Now, that scared me off drugs.
Yeah.
Mother gets leukemia, goes through this fight for 7 years. And at the end of the 7 years, she got to a point where they said, mate, it's done and dusted. You can have the treatment, but you might go into a coma. And at that point in time, I sort of just went, enough's enough. I'd go out on a drink. I'd go out with a lot of the football boys. And
this is your 28 now?
Yeah, and, Bourbon was open there, and we'd be out and
Black
about.
market?
Black market or, partying. But I wouldn't take anything.
Yeah.
But I got to this point, I suppose it weighed heavy on me, and I just went, enough's enough. Give me some of that, and got into that. And so I never really took drugs to commit crimes for, I suppose. And mine was just about the habit became such a habit, I thought that was normal. And this is the only way you make money.
To rob?
Yeah, and I'd be like, why would they work all week for $1,500? I'll get like 150 grand or whatever it was in 1 minute. Why would I worry about doing it that way? And that was just the normal.
Take us back to that first time where you said, I'm going to rob a bank, I'm choosing this bank. Did you get away with that first time? And just the whole planning around it, and what was the aftermath?
I think the biggest thing is, like, you take it back before that, and we used to snatch money off bank counters, and we were so fit. We had a good crew. We all grew up together.
Redfern?
Yeah, like you
wouldn't go somewhere else.
Oh no, we'd go out of that. We'd never. If you want to live in a good area, live in an area full of criminals because they don't want to do crime in the area. Right. If you don't want your house robbed, there's a tip. Even if you move into Mount Druitt, I don't know if you'd like the suburbs. Sometimes each to their own. It's a free world. But like for me, that first time. It was on the back end, we'd snatch money off bank counters. And funnily enough, just up the road here in Crow's Nest, we'd gone all day, snatched a whole bunch of money off bank counters, made over 200,000, just two of us. And then they filmed us and caught us in that sense. And then I just got to a point where I said, we're snatching money off these counters, but I could probably jump over that counter. And we were having these conversations, and they're like, you reckon you get a crack? I was like, I'll give it a crack. I was always someone that would just give anything a crack, and I had no fear. And one thing led to another, and off we went. And they always say, Joel, don't talk about what you didn't get called for. So, and I mean that respectfully. Yeah. Like one of the hardest things in this world is to get to a point in your life where I've moved forward, and I want to be better and give back to what I took away. But you obviously can't speak about a lot of stuff because obviously it was a way of life, and it was just and I mean that nicely. I've moved on from that person. That person doesn't exist anymore, and I've let that chapter 5 go, and I'm chapter 55, and I'm proud of who I became.
We can't wait to speak about chapter 55, but can you just share some insight or a memory of being inside? And this is very sad. What I read, Brian, was you're actually inside at the time when you lost both your mum and dad. Is that true?
Yeah, correct. So I never got to say goodbye to him.
No.
And Dad had collapsed at home. They took him to hospital, and they're like, where'd you get the burn on your arm? And he said, what burn? And they realised it was a brain tumour. So by the time I got to talk to him, he was in and out of sort of consciousness and knowing who I was, and he's like talking about Indians and Martians and stuff like that. So his brain was obviously affected at that time. And he'd come in for a moment, and I'd say, hey, Dad, just so you know, I love you, man. And, it was...
he'd come and visit you? Or
nah, by then, Fletch, he'd been in hospital. He was at Penrith. And, to me, that was a reflection of the choices I made, and you can never, ever get that back. And, it's probably every lesson's a blessing. Yeah. For everybody out there, go and make sure that you love your parents, and no matter how bad they've been to you in your eyes, try and find out why it happened, because once I found out through that letter that he'd been abused, I'd be like, oh, wow, he was trying to get discipline into me so I wasn't him in his eyes. And I carried that hate and anger for a long time, and I was like angry on the world. Plus, you add Everleigh Street to that, being Aboriginal, and everyone's against us. And like once you turn that around, you can understand that it's about yourself. Everything's a self-reflection of how you see the world. And I started to shift and change that. And like you look back on that, priceless.
Yep. Chapter 55 he's talking about is where his life's going now, which is absolutely thriving and doing a lot of goodness. We're going to get into what he's doing in life, but I thought a good segue is a story he told us in the break, Brian,
it's
about how serious you took. So you were called like the superstar of the hood. Now you're the superstar of good, right? So things have certainly changed there.
Oh, that's a good one.
You like that?
You
Yeah,
like that one?
love
You can use that.
Love that.
Can we get that on a T-shirt?
Yeah, get on the T-shirt.
I pee that straight away.
So the superstar of, we're going to tell one more story of the superstar of the hood, then we're going to the superstar of good. So you would tell us about the bank robberies and the effort, and we're not at all. Some people will get up in their high horses and say, oh, you're glorifying bank robberies, and no, we're not doing that at all. But we're sharing, and we're going to allude to the point where in everything you've done in life, good or bad, you've been so committed to do it properly, even for bad.
Absolutely.
So tell the listening audience what you told myself and Brian around how you would prepare physically to rob a bank back in the day.
Well, obviously, going through the juniors in football, I knew what level of fitness was required to play at a high level, and I realised that, father was the same. We'd be out at Redfern Oval at the back and kicking a soccer ball.
Yep.
He's German, Austrian, so he obviously wanted me to play soccer. And for me, left foot, right foot, 100 on this side, 100 on that side, and there was a little bunch of monkey bars. There's 9 little squares in it, and I'd get 100 in there, 100 in there, 100. So that discipline carried on, and then into the club and being able to learn that and see that. I just carried that into bank robberies and made sure, like, what happens if we crash a car? Can you run? And then can you run with a backpack full of money? How much? What's that weigh? So we got it down to a fine science of how you put, how much did X weigh?
Yep.
And then basically, can you run with X? And for me, it was about knowing the route a week leading up to it. Doing things that allowed us to make that as smooth as possible. And I know, you've touched on it, I'll say it as well. I don't ever promote crime anymore, but I want people to have context of what happened then and how we were built, and how if we don't step in as a society, we're going to continue to see other people feel that they're if we judge somebody, they're going to say, oh, well, it's us versus you. That's how we were at Redfern. And what do you think I'm going to do the next time I get an opportunity to go and rob another bank? Because it's us versus you. And that, to me, you go out and if you do anything, do it well. A lot of people don't want to do it well because they have a fear of failure or anxiety, even stepping into something. You be the champion of being a beginner, and that allows you to just say, you know what, I'll give it a crack and see where it takes me. And that's all we ever did.
And there was a time too, Fletch, where you were actually running with a backpack on for the weight, which literally has the money in it this time, and you could sense a police officer saying, how's this guy still going? But you had trained so hard for it. And again, not glorifying it, but it's just the dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's, Fletch.
Morgs, I want to ask you, what are you feeling like? Are you nervous? Are you pumped when you're just about to go? And is it the same sort of feeling before you run out playing footy? Or, that it's a weird feeling. I've never been able to get that feeling again.
Yeah.
Where it's like you're nervous, but you're also pumped and looking forward to it, but a little bit scared.
Absolutely. It's a combination of so many, emotions and feelings. You can't even wrap them up. It's like, New Year's, your birthday, your anniversary with your wife, all wrapped up in one, because you're sort of happy, you're nervous, am I doing the right thing, am I doing the wrong thing, am I prepped, did I get the right cake, or whatever it may be. The same principle around this. And then you get in there, it's akin to surprise. You don't know how much money you're going to get. And for us, it was just like, that was, I suppose, the thrill of the chase at the time, to be real and put it in context to the version back then, so listeners understand
it's a different time.
Time.
Yeah, and that version of you back then, the superstar of the hood, that led to the best part of 20 years in jail, right? So,
absolutely.
So now you've changed your life and you've gone a long way from the boy who many people, at the Domain, there's a car park there and there's that long conveyor belt. A travelator that takes you to the city.
Yeah.
Goes over probably couple hundred metres.
Yeah, easy.
That used to be your bed, didn't it?
Correct. At 12 years of age, ran away from the abusive father and hit the streets, and just up the road in High Park, we're getting those packets of chips and then going down underneath. And the reason why, it was nice and warm, there was cameras there. It was a long travelator, it was, a couple of 100 metres long, and you could sort of split into 3 sections, and we slept in the middle section. You'd feel somebody coming along, so you sort of open your eyes, have a look, and People coming down towards the domain, very rare. If they did, it was usually someone from Woolloomooloo, and they were probably in the same boat as yourself, so you didn't have to worry too much.
Good, bad or ugly, that's all build you today, right? It's all played a little part in today. The superstar of Good Morgs, this story which is now. Tell us what life is right now. You've got your beautiful partner, Sally. She's here as well. What's life now? What are you doing out there?
For us, we're travelling around the globe. Leadership, well-being, high performance habits. Every lesson was a blessing from my past. So I was a high performer, but I was just destructive in how I performed. Yep. And then all I had to do is transition those into a constructive way, good, bad, yin to the yang, whatever you want to call it. And I just went, I've got the skill there. Sometimes people overthink things. I need a bachelor's degree. I need something to start something. Biggest thing I'd say is just start with the skills that you do have. And that, you think of a mother. She's great at time management. As an example, find what you're great at and use that skill to actually transition into a better way of life. And
when did the penny, when did the penny drop for you? Like, were you inside and you went, this is it. When I get out, I'm never doing this again? Or was there a moment that it sort of
It was in
for you?
Melbourne. Like, I got locked up down there. I got arrested for a bank robbery down there, 2003. I was going to trial. Our crew was loyal. And I went back to the jail and said, Colin Lovett at the time did the Baby in the Dam case, Greg Domasevich. And I was the next trial after him. He helped him beat it, and then I was the next trial. So we went into that thinking, here, I've got someone good, going really well during the trial. He said, I need your mates to come and say this. Well, we didn't say that. He said, what would your mates say about what happened? And I said, they'll say I wasn't there. Went back to the jail. They didn't. They said, no, I'm not going to mess myself up for sentencing. And pretty much at that point in time, everything I gave my loyalty and strength to, I realised that I just wasted my time. I was like, man, if this is what I'm, loyal to, and we had these. The criminal world's really twisted. You have these terms, being staunch. What about being staunch to the kids that I brought into this world? And I had 2 kids that I fathered, but I was no father.
And that's when it sort of.
Absolutely. I was in the back of a truck, Fletch, and I broke down crying, to be honest, and I couldn't stop crying. And I was like, I think it was a realisation, this is it. I'm not ever going to come out of it. And when I got back, they took me to the slot, which meant 3 months in a cell by myself. And when I walked out, I bumped into a bloke who was a professor at Deakin Uni, and he offered a bachelor's degree, and the rest was history.
Wow, good on you, mate.
Morgs, we've got to run, but I reckon we've got to get you back on another time as well.
I was just thinking, how did like corporates and anyone get in contact with you?
jeffreymorgan.com.au.
Yeah, I was going to say that. So a lot of people be driving there saying, I'd love this guy. And there's always more budget these days for this type of stuff at corporates. They'd say, I'd love to have that story told to my workmates. We'll go to... as you said,
jeffreymorgan.com.au.
Jeffrey Morgan, that's with a J2, by the way. And social media, the Jeffrey Morgan, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. So check all that out, mate. He's flying. And
OnlyFans? You want OnlyFans? Yeah.
But a global business, Fletch. Global business.
I don't know how Sal would go with that.
On behalf of myself, Brian, the
awesome.
tourist, Sleazy Sammy, our man Brooksy, congratulations on what you've achieved.
Champion, mate.
You're a good man, Morg. What, you're still here? Well, you can see more on the Joel and Fletch socials and catch us live on SEN Radio, you beautiful humans.